joining us right now. So it's 3 minutes. I can't even say what time it is because everyone is a different time zone. So 3 minutes past hour. And I think we're going to start a little bit with some logistics and then go through a few topics. So let me introduce myself. My name is Pavel Dobritsky. I'm a chair of Coaches Commission of South African Rowing Federation, and what I wanted to do is organize a webinar for our local coaches, and then it became quite an international webinar, looking at all the attendees here to talk about the data tools and how coaches can leverage the data and performance to improve the athletes' performance and behavior. We're about to talk about some agenda, but I want to start, I always like to start with a little narrative. I am dialing from Brest, from Belarus, because I'm training here with the national team, Belarusian national team, for the past few weeks. And as a rower, coach always tells you things that you do wrong. So one of the things I've been hearing for the past few weeks is that I lean too much at the catch. So the coach would say, you're leaning too much at the catch. And then, as an athlete, you always say, oh gosh, I'm trying not to. Until one day, I just went to an erg room, a gym room, and sat on my own, and I found a mirror. In fact, it's not a mirror, it's like a repurposed door from a cupboard. And I put it right next to me to look at my own rowing technique, and then looked at myself and was like, oh my gosh, I now understand what actually he means, and I was able to correct it. So the importance of biofeedback is the importance of seeing in data information and ability to correct it yourself in order to improve your technique and performance. On the other hand, when talking about data right now, I think nowadays we do have too many data points, right? So it's looking at your Garmin watch and Polar, heart rate monitor, and all these different apps we use. It's like looking at 1,000 different mirrors, and sometimes they're giving you very different information, conflicting information. So nowadays, I think there's a different challenge for coaches and athletes is which mirror to look at, right? So which data point to focus on, because sometimes they do give you conflicting or different instructions. So that's the purpose of this webinar, is to introduce the tool TrainingPeaks and how one location can help you as a coach find the correct data and create correct insights for yourself and for your athletes. So that's what we're going to do today. A little bit of an agenda. So welcome everyone. I see that we have 58 people joining us already. I think it's quite a big webinar. In about a moment, I'm going to hand over to Patrick to take us through TrainingPeaks overview. We'll have about half an hour to talk about the platform. Then we'll have some Q&A. So you're welcome to submit your questions either in the chat, so I'll try to monitor it throughout the webinar, or there's also a special at the bottom of your Zoom screen, a special Q&A section where you can submit your questions. So it's probably going to be easier for me to see those questions straight away. And then after that, I think I'm very excited for that part. For 15 minutes, Tiago is going to talk us through the pilot implementation of TrainingPeaks with the South African national rowing team. So that's what we'll do. And then we'll wrap up maybe some questions and final next steps. All right. I don't want to take too much of anyone's time talking about mirrors and rowing techniques. Let's get straight into TrainingPeaks. Pat, it's over to you.
Great. Yeah, thanks for the intro, Pavel. I will say what we're going to do today, we're going to kind of go through, some of you may have already been using TrainingPeaks as a coach for a while. Some of you may be brand new. Some of you maybe have just heard about it and never actually tried it out. And so my goal today is just to get the group to better understand what TrainingPeaks is, how you use it and, how it can impact your coaching and your athletes. So for some of you who may have been using TrainingPeaks as a coach for a while, this part of it might not be as important. You might learn a thing or two, but I think more importantly, when we get into with Pavel and Tiago, the details of how they're using it, I think will be, pretty important for you to kind of cue in and understand some of those use cases. So we'll go through, I will go through some specifics on like general setup, what that looks like, some of the tools that are available, how to use those tools, like athlete management, some of these compliance colors. Like if you're not using any kind of software today, there are really tools within TrainingPeaks that allow you to A, understand if your athletes are doing those workouts, and B, get a better idea right away. Are they actually doing the workout as planned, or is it, above or below plan? So there's some tools in there, including notifications that are going to help you become a better coach with your athletes. And then we'll just go through some high level pricing, what that looks like. And I will mention, I'll jump into this at the end as well, but for any coach who has not used TrainingPeaks, I would encourage you to start a free trial. So we're going to have a follow-up email go out to every registered coach. There's going to be an opportunity to start a trial, and then that trial is a 7-day trial, but part of the webinar here, we're going to actually extend that so you have a 14-day trial. There's also a custom code that you can use to waive the $99 startup fee to actually use your coach account. So more to come on that, but I would encourage anyone, there's no commitment. All it requires is for you to email me back and say, hey, I started my trial and here's my username. And I will assist you one-to-one. So if we need to hop on another call after that, I'm happy to do so. This is just, really high level before I share my screen on my coach account. There's the coaching side, but then there's also the athlete side of things. So your athletes will download the mobile app, and they are going to be receiving a number of different things. The workout itself, they can comment. That's how they're going to be communicating with you. This is all one-to-one. So they're going to be commenting. You as the coach can reply with a post-activity comment, and then they're going to tell you how they're feeling, right? They have an RPE slider scale for every workout. And as a coach, I can show you where you'll be seeing that. And then finally, in terms of connections, I'll walk through this again, but TrainingPeaks will sync with almost every device. So up here on the top right, you see Apple, Garmin, Wahoo. There's also Suunto, Coros, and a number of different third-party apps that will sync directly with TrainingPeaks. So I'm going to go ahead and hop into my coach account. So let's actually take a look at sort of the beginning. Like I've set this up so we have a couple of athletes in here, but as a new coach in TrainingPeaks, you are going to first want to add an athlete. And I will say TrainingPeaks can be accessed by a coach on the mobile app. There's some limited functionality there, but I would really recommend using a computer for your coaching. It's going to kind of give you the best experience and make things a bit easier. So really the first thing you're doing is just going to your athlete library and adding an athlete. This link is what you're going to send the athletes to, accept your invitation. So you'll email this link to them. They'll download the mobile app, and then they'll create an athlete account for themselves. They might already have an athlete account, which is fine. Once they accept that invite, that's when they're going to show up as an athlete on your coach account. From here, this is where you can create different groups. So I just use an example of, beginner, intermediate, advanced. You can shuffle these athletes into different groups, so it makes your planning, very fast and efficient. If you need to find a specific athlete, you can search for them here as well. Once you have your athletes added, one of the things I always like to say to coaches who are brand new to TrainingPeaks, and I will say, if you have used TrainingPeaks as an athlete, but never as a coach, you're a step ahead, right? So it's definitely beneficial to, if there's, coaches on the call here who haven't used TrainingPeaks, I would recommend just downloading the mobile app right now, create an athlete account for yourself. Because what you can do is when you, when you start your coach account, is you can attach yourself as an athlete like you see here. So this is my coach account. I've attached myself as an athlete. And what this allows me to do is if I want to test things out on my own, I can, and I can view that on the mobile app, but I can also manage my athletes and I can kind of view my own data as well. So TrainingPeaks, for anyone who's brand new, can be as simple or as complex as you want it to be. There are a lot of different metrics involved with TrainingPeaks, which is great. We love our data, but not all coaches are the same. Not everyone is going to be using the same type of data and the same charts and dashboards and analyzing the data in the same way. So I would say to start, think about why you might need TrainingPeaks to begin with. And if that is just a more efficient and effective way of communicating your workouts to your athletes, then we can do that. It doesn't mean that you need to know every single last metric in TrainingPeaks right off the bat. Right. So from a very basic level, once that athlete has been attached to your coach account, you can go into their calendar and you can start planning. I'm actually going to go back to like last week for myself as an example. So what you see here, these are just files. I have a Suunto watch, and every time I complete a workout, these files are coming directly into TrainingPeaks. So as a coach, you can click on any one of those files. You can look at some high level data, and then you can also comment like I showed you earlier. You can add a post activity comment. Now, if I were to comment on this right here, this is a completed workout, that athlete would receive a notification saying, Coach Pat commented on your workout. They could respond to you in there as well. So that's kind of our way of doing communication. It's not an instant message, but it's an easy way for you to have those conversations with the athletes pretty easily and efficiently. There also is a way to analyze this data. Now, some coaches use a lot of these charts. We have a charts library, and I would encourage you as you start the trial, and I'm sure some of you are already using TrainingPeaks and understand how to use these charts, but I would encourage you to kind of dig into this a bit more and determine, what charts are important to me as a coach, because there's a lot of data that comes in through here. And you can see this is just a run that I did. We can see cadence, power, temperature. There's some things in here that I just don't want to see, right? So maybe I just want to see my heart rate and my pace for that entire run. Really easy to do. And then here's all my laps and splits. So a lot of solid data that comes in here. Heart rate by zone, right? So that's one other thing I'll talk about in a minute here are zones. So as a coach, you have the ability to set up specific zones for your athletes. So when the data comes back to you, this is reading in an accurate measure of, my running zones that I have set up in TrainingPeaks. So in terms of planning, there's really two ways that we can do that. One way is just to click on the plus sign on any given day. And that's where we'll do a number of things, right? We have all these different options. And I should mention, I know, we have our rowing coaches here, and there's probably some other coaches who kind of, have different disciplines that they're coaching. We also have a new strength tool. So we all know how important that is. And I literally connect with thousands of coaches every year, and we have conversations about how am I getting strength into my planning. And TrainingPeaks just launched this new strength builder about a year ago. And again, it's something that the feedback that we were receiving from coaches is just, hey, I need an easier way to plan for my strength, or I have a separate strength coach that needs to be able to plan for them. So we have a library of over 1,000 different exercises with videos attached. All you're doing here is searching for that movement. This is the video hosted on YouTube that the athletes will view on the mobile app. As a coach, you can add your prescriptions in here. Okay, you can make all of these adjustments for them. And on the athlete side on the mobile app, they will have the ability to adjust the number of reps completed and the weight completed as well. So you get that feedback just like you would from a workout file, say for a row or a run coming into TrainingPeaks. You'll have that feedback for strength as well. You also have the ability to create your own exercises. So maybe there's something, let's just say rowing specific, or there's an exercise you can't find in here. You can actually create your own custom exercises, and we're just, creating a title, and you can add your parameters and a video from either YouTube or Vimeo. So next time you want to use that, you're just searching for that specific movement in your library. So you can easily customize that. So let's go ahead and hop out of here. In terms of anything endurance related, so let's just hop into a row workout. So there's a couple different things you can do here. So one is just, the most basic way of planning in TrainingPeaks is to add some details into this planned column. So if we were going to say we want our athletes to row for an hour, and we can add a specific distance into here, it'll spit out an average pace. Then the description box is really where you're going to be adding the details of that session. So similar to what you see here, that's kind of what we've done. Okay, so we have the details. The athletes are going to see this on the mobile app. So they're going to know ahead of time what they actually need to do for that specific workout. On the mobile app, they can actually tell you like, hey, I actually completed 1,500 meters, 15,000 meters instead of 14. They can make those adjustments on their end. But in terms of the file coming into TrainingPeaks, Pavel mentioned Garmin, his athletes using Garmin. Those workout files, once that is completed, will come directly into TrainingPeaks, whether that's an outdoor row or something on Concept. TrainingPeaks will sync with Concept, so you do have data coming in from Concept, but then you also have a file coming in from Garmin. Pavel and Tiago can kind of jump into what that looks like and how they manage that as well. But I just want everyone to know that it is possible to have that data coming from the Concept Rower into TrainingPeaks as well.
So Pat, so maybe as you're talking about the integration with all the different watches and technologies, and you yourself mentioned using a different brand. Um, so can you mention kind of the scope of integration and what type of data can you pull into that tool?
Yeah, are you asking rowing specific or just really any app or device?
So obviously we have rowing specific, which you mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
Garmin watch, smartwatch, but Concept 2, logbook, and Polar, and so on. But maybe kind of is it limited or do you have more?
Yeah, so we have our own page that kind of breaks down every device that we sync with. So again, like there's a ton of different options in here. Garmin is the one device that will actually sync historical data. So if you do have athletes who have a Garmin device, make sure that when they are setting up TrainingPeaks, that they check this box to sync 5 years worth of data. So, as a coach, you're going to actually see, depending on how long they've been training, you'll have all that data available versus some of the other apps, say like Apple or Polar, those will sync data from today moving forward. Um, and we kind of break this page down by like sport specific. There's some nutrition that we can get into here, but for rowing, we can see Crew Nerd, Concept 2, EXR. Those are some examples of sort of third-party apps or devices that will sync into TrainingPeaks. There's also, from a nutrition standpoint, MyFitnessPal, Fuelin, the Athlete's Food Coach. Those are some of the other main apps that will sync with TrainingPeaks. And I can show you an example of what, say, Fuelin looks like for that athlete when it's pulling data for that specific workout or suggestions for that workout into TrainingPeaks as well. But yeah, I mean, there's so many different options that give coaches and athletes the availability to view that data and bring it into TrainingPeaks. And then let's just look at a couple of ways that, like, as a coach, we can make you more efficient and effective, right? So let's just say today you're a coach and you're using Google Sheets and a PDF. TrainingPeaks gives you tools that will allow you to be more efficient and effective, and you can save any workout that you create to be used again in the future. So that's where this workout library comes into play. So anytime that I take the time to build out a workout, I can drag that into my library and use that again in the future. So You can have all different sport types in here. You can use this filter that allows you to select a specific workout type or a certain distance or duration to easily find that. But at the end of the day, what we're doing is we're allowing you to just take that workout that you've created on, say, a different athlete's calendar, and just drag and drop that into another athlete's calendar. And at that point, it's there. Like, I could open up the mobile app right now, and this will be on Saturday. This will be visible to me. Um, Again, in terms of efficiency, once this is thrown on my calendar, I can right click to copy this. I can right click to paste. So you can even go from one athlete's calendar to another. So if I'm on my athlete calendar, but I want to bring this over to, say, Jeff, I can now just right click and paste onto Jeff's calendar as well. And you can do that for an entire week. So if I have a week's worth of planned workouts, I can click on the week controls, which are these three dots, and I can copy that. I can paste it. I can also hide it, which means let's say that you plan for 4 weeks in advance for every athlete, and you don't want them to see those workouts ahead of time on the mobile app. You can hide them, right? So the athlete can't even see it. You can also lock those workouts. So that means the athlete cannot edit or reschedule the workout. Um, just be sure, of course, on Sunday night, you're going in and unhiding those workouts. So at the beginning of the week, the athlete knows exactly what they should be doing. From here, the other option in terms of planning would be training plans. So we have a workout library. Those are our single workouts, but we also have training plans. So that is going to be a way for you to build out, say, an 8-week or a 12-week block of training, have that saved, and then apply it to an athlete's calendar at any time. So if I go in to create a new training plan, let's just say this is our 12-week build. This is actually taking me to a static template, right? So there's nothing here yet. It's all week by week. And it's my responsibility now. I'm actually going to either build individual workouts on this template, on this plan, or I can pull from my library. So, I can easily, again, just drag workouts into that training plan. And now all I'm doing, let's say that this 12-week plan is ready to be assigned to an athlete. I'm just going in and searching for that 12-week build. And I can now select the athlete or multiple athletes that I want to apply that to. So if I was going to say, okay, well, Jeff, I want to assign that 12-week plan onto Jeff's calendar, we can select a start date. We'll say Monday the 23rd, and I'll go ahead and apply that. Within seconds, 12 weeks of programming are now applied onto Jeff's calendar. So it is now my responsibility to hop into Jeff's calendar to do a few things. Okay, so here's what we just added. I can now hide these, if I need to, or I can adjust some of the workouts, because when we created that plan, some of the workouts that were on there might be more of a general workout that can be used for anyone. But as a coach, it's my responsibility to come into here and actually maybe change the details of that workout specific for Jeff's needs.
There's some questions in the chat. So I would like,
Yeah,
as we're talking
absolutely.
about the workouts. So one of the growing workouts you described is something we call a state. So you said an hour, 14 kilometers, but example, training, for example, an athlete would need to do 6 kilometers warm up and then do 5 times 500 meters intervals. So how would you set up something like that on TrainingPeaks? Is it only through description, or there are other tools available for interval training?
Yeah, great question. So let's just use this one as an example. This is sort of the more basic way of planning. And there's no right or wrong here. It depends on what your needs are for your athlete or, for you as a coach. So if you're creating a workout in this manner, you're adding a planned duration and distance, and then you're adding a description to that workout. So that's number one, right? And the athlete will receive that on their mobile app. The other option, which you probably notice here on Saturday for this run, is you notice these sort of bars at the bottom. That's actually called a structured workout. And so what you have the ability to do is create, and actually let's just jump into like a new workout right here. Um, so let's come into here. So what I was mentioning earlier is like, if I wanted to use the more basic way of planning, I would say, okay, well, I'm going to have you do an hour and we're going to be doing, 12,000 meters. And here's the description, right? If I'm going to use the structured workout builder, then I don't need to add anything into this plan column. We're actually going to click into build workout. So this is important to note in that if you are using, and it's important no matter what to have your athlete's zones correct. And I'll show you how to do that. We'll take a quick look at that in a minute. But if you're using the structured workout builder, this is actually looking at an athlete's specific, like rowing specific zones. So we now can choose a distance or duration, and we can choose meters or yards and a pace, right? And so you can do a number of things for any sort of sport type: power, heart rate, pace, or RPE. Okay. So now what I'm doing is I'm actually selecting a range or a target, and I have the ability to select any number of these options. So let's say we're doing a warm up. I'll click on that. And this builds a 2,000 meter warm up at 55 to 65% of that athlete's threshold pace. So if you can see here, these are the zones that I have set up in TrainingPeaks right now. So as a coach, I can select, okay, well, we're at 75 to 80% of threshold pace, which means we're doing our warm up in zone 1. So the unique thing about this is TrainingPeaks will actually, and I'll speak to, really any of the major sport types like, running, cycling, rowing. This will send to the athlete's device. So if your athlete's wearing a Garmin, as an example, and you set up a workout in a structured format, they will receive the workout on their watch. There are also, in terms of rowing specifically, there are a couple of different third-party apps that will actually accept that structured format. And what I'll do is in my follow-up email, I'll include some of those details. So if anyone's interested in looking at that, you can certainly test that out on yourself or one of your athletes as well. But this is, generally speaking, this is like, what I would recommend as sort of like the more effective way of planning, in that it'll give your athletes the option to follow on their device, but then also, as you're creating this, it actually builds these workout details. So what you saw earlier was like, I actually typed out that workout in the description, but instead, as I'm selecting these options, it's actually building this for me. So I don't need to do extra typing. So the athlete is going to be seeing this on their mobile app anyways. So it gives a really good breakdown of what they need to be doing. You can also add, specific coach notes for each section of that workout.
Thank you so much. There's just one more question before we can move on
Yeah.
to heart rate zones and the rest. I think there's observation from Coach K that when you copy workouts week by week, then for some reason she noticed that notes don't get copied. So I don't know if you know.
Pavel, sorry, you broke up there for a second. We had a question about notes being copied or not
Sorry.
copied from one week to another. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, that is something that our product team is aware of, in terms of, if we were to take, like, if there was a note, what coach here is speaking about is a note that you add onto the athlete's calendar. This is something that, you can add a file to. Those, as of today, those don't copy over into, so if I were to take this whole week and copy and paste it, they don't copy as of today, but it's certainly something that is on our product team's radar. I will say, it's because I know we do have coaches here who use TrainingPeaks. I'll include this in the follow-up email, but we have a user voice forum and we love feedback. Okay, so definitely please send feedback along, because really anything that any suggestions, especially in the rowing world, because we don't see rowing within TrainingPeaks isn't as significant as, say, running or cycling. But we are starting to see a lot more of that. So it's very beneficial for everyone, our product team and all of you coaches, to provide feedback, because that's certainly what we could all benefit from. So I'd encourage everyone to do that. Absolutely. Okay, so let's hop into zones. I think that would be beneficial. And since I'm on this homepage, I also want to point out that I have the ability to, every athlete has this drop down where it gives you the ability to view the upcoming events for that athlete. And then there's also this coach journal. So you have the ability to add notes that will not be visible to that athlete. So maybe it's a conversation you've had, it's nutrition, injury, just keeping a log for that specific athlete, and being able to come back to that and refer back to it is super helpful. I know that's one thing that some coaches don't really utilize or see, but is certainly something worth mentioning so everyone knows that it's there. When we talked about structured workout builder, and I mentioned zones, so every athlete has their own settings and zones. So let's actually go into my zones. So let's look on the far left side here. I'm going to click on zones. And here we have heart rate, power, speed, and pace. So every athlete is going to have a default speed and pace, but you can also create sport specific zones. And that's what I would encourage everyone to do, whether you're, maybe we have a triathlon coach or triathlon coaches here today, maybe we have cycling coaches. If you have athletes who are doing a number of different disciplines, that's also super important to make sure that you have sport specific zones set up in here. So you can see, like, if I only had default speed and pace, that means that when I create a structured workout for rowing, it's also, using that for running and swimming. So that is just one thing I want to point out here, is that you do have the ability to update all of these. So if I were going in to update rowing, let's actually just add an activity here. Oops, add a zone. Sorry, remove this. You know what? I apologize. I'm gonna go to this is my actual. I didn't want to like mess with that too much. This is not a real person. So let's actually go into Jeff, who is a robot. So we're gonna go in here and we're actually going to add an activity, right? And we'll go into rowing here. And this is where we would actually select the threshold for that athlete. So Thiago, what would you say is like a threshold we could add into here, just as an example?
So let's call it 158 beats per minute.
158. Okay. Okay. So in here, there are, you will select a methodology. So again, like these are already set up. And all I want to point out is, like, even though you see like we do not have rowing specific zones, but you'll see why, like when I say it doesn't matter, it does matter, but you have the ability to update all of these, right? So if even though this is like a running zone, I can actually go in and add my specific details here. And once I set this up, let's just say, we'll say duration. I'm just going to add in some details here. Right. Once I add those calculations, I can apply these zones. And once they've been applied, I can edit the zones. So now that I've done this, I can come into here. I can change the name of the zone. I can add more zones and I can remove them. So maybe I only want, I want 4 zones total. You can really customize this to be specifically for your needs or that athlete specific needs. And that, again, that will talk to, when you're creating a structured workout, that will talk to sort of the zone selection that we had when we were building that. So it is very important that you have those accurate, and any time that you're doing a threshold test, you're going to actually come back into here and update, go through this process of updating those zones. There is an option in here to automatically apply new threshold changes. In your coach account, it is unchecked. Okay, if you want to have those threshold changes automatically apply, you can just come into here and actually check that box. We don't do that because if we were to do a test with an athlete today and we updated their zones, and then tomorrow they go out and they do a hard effort when they weren't supposed to, maybe we don't want that the TrainingPeaks to automatically update that for them. So that's just something worth noting, that I think some coaches miss that as well. That's a common question we have is, how can I get TrainingPeaks to automatically update for my athlete? The answer is yes, but you do have to come into here and check that box. So we looked at zones, we looked at workout libraries, training plans, some tools that allow you to be more efficient and effective. And then there's also the dashboard, which that also, we looked at the individual workout analysis. The dashboard will give you the ability to pull in data from a specific date range. So if I wanted to look at data from the last 90 days for this athlete, I can now go in on the left side here. I can choose from some of these charts that are available to me. Okay, so you can see even just as basic as this, what's my fitness summary for this athlete. And a lot of these charts you can customize as well. So we can have planned distance, completed distance. Some of these are very effective. This chart, I'm sure for coaches who have been using TrainingPeaks for a little while, this is called the performance management chart. If you are new to TrainingPeaks and you haven't used it as a coach, you're probably wondering what the heck this is. I personally would be happy to walk you through. If you start your trial and you start digging into the data, I'm happy to kind of walk you through what this is and why I believe it's one of the more important charts in TrainingPeaks. It is, at a high level, TrainingPeaks metrics are, the training stress score is one of the main metrics that, will be important to you as a coach. So every single workout is assigned a training stress score. So if we look at yesterday, I did this run as an example. Training stress score was 73, and that's heart rate training stress score. So that's actually pulling from my heart rate zones for running. So what this is based off of, training stress score, is based off of duration and intensity for that particular workout. So intensity, when we say intensity, we're just talking about a percentage of that athlete's threshold. So I wasn't necessarily going super hard for this run. If I was, this number here, the intensity factor would be closer to, if you're at 1.0, you're going at threshold. And essentially TSS is going, the harder your athlete's going, the higher the TSS score, and the longer. So the more duration, the more intensity, the higher the training stress score. And essentially, like if we go back to the dashboard in this particular chart, like that is every single dot that you see here is a single workout over the last 180 days. And the blue line that we're following here, that is my fitness. So the other TrainingPeaks metric is CTL. That's chronic training load. That's a 6-week average of TSS. So as you're coaching an athlete, the more fit they get, the more intense their workouts can be and the longer duration they can handle. And so their TSS for every workout should, increase. And in turn, that's where that number, the CTL, the chronic training load, is also increasing. So this blue line that you see over time is my fitness. And we're actually looking at my specific data. So you can see, without, let's just say this is an athlete that you didn't even know about. And I guess no one knows what I'm training for, but you can see this spike right here was an event, right? You can see my blue line, my fitness was building up towards that specific event. And you can actually see a little bit of a drop in my fitness right here as I rested going into that event. After the event, I took a break. So that's where I'm shedding some of that CTL, some of that fitness. So I'm not where I was. My CTL was at 91 back in April, but I've sort of flattened out, into, say the 70s as I continue training, but maybe not at the same volume.
Pat, so there's some questions which I want to ask you from the attendees. So first of all, about this chart, performance management chart, it is quite a complicated tool, and I think can take people aback when they first see it.
Yeah.
Laura is asking if there's a video, maybe an explanation video somewhere on YouTube they can watch to understand it a little bit better.
Yeah, I would say if you don't have a coach account yet, absolutely you can Google performance management chart TrainingPeaks. There's a lot of information in there that will give a breakdown, including some videos. If you do have a coach account right now, you can actually in your directly in here, if you click on actually, let's go back here on the bottom. That is not the help center. Gives you the ability to go in and either ask questions to our team, or one of the links that I will include in the follow-up email is a link to our TrainingPeaks Coach Help Center that also has direct access to everything you can imagine, including the performance management chart. But I would say for the coaches who are brand new to TrainingPeaks and you have not used it before, even as an athlete, let this be like the goal. Don't let it be something that like confuses you right away, because it can be. I wanted to just touch on it because I do believe it's a very important chart to be able to understand. But let that be the goal, say in a few months from now. Let's say you start your trial today and you start onboarding athletes in a couple weeks. Let it be your goal in 3 weeks to understand what this means. Because you do not have to know all that data right away. I think it is, it can be, all of the data in TrainingPeaks can be a very important tool. And I also want to mention TrainingPeaks University, which again, I will follow up on. This will be included in the email that everyone receives. TrainingPeaks University is where we host all of our online courses. So aside from the Coach Help Center, this is a great way to further your learning in TrainingPeaks. Specifically, the Essentials bundle is going to give you, as a coach, the ability to go through this Essentials course and then the Advanced Essentials. There's no cost to them. Kind of learn as you want when you have time, but the Advanced Essentials will dive into some of that very specific data that we've kind of covered at a very high level today. So I'd strongly recommend that.
Thank you. Pat, I think I want to make sure that we have enough time for Tiago to talk us through the trial we had for the past few months. I think maybe one last final question for you is we have some athletes in at the web joining the webinar as well, and they're looking for maybe training programs, maybe structured training programs, pairing them with other coaches, or maybe buying those programs for rowing. Are there any of those programs for rowing exist? Can they access some libraries? Can they access training plans specifically, obviously for rowing as a sport?
Yeah, we actually do have a store. Okay, so there's a TrainingPeaks marketplace that allows athletes to search for any number of plans. And coaches, who are in here, you might already know this, but you do have the ability with your paid coach account to create plans and sell them in TrainingPeaks. To answer the athlete's question, yes, you can actually come into here. You can use these filters, right? Let's just select rowing. And again, I'm just going to call this out to any coaches who are here. I'll just go back. Let's just look at that again. If we're in the TrainingPeaks store, you see 10,000 plans that are available. Okay. When I click on rowing, there's 18. So I'm just going to point out that there's a market for this. I think we could use some more in here. So certainly if you're wanting to, make some additional income and attempt to sell these plans, do that through your coach account. It's super easy. From the athlete's perspective, you have the ability to now come into here and either sort by price or skill level. And then you can come into here and take a closer look at what some of these training plans are. Okay, so I can purchase this. Like if you purchase this as an athlete, you'll have that on your mobile app in your athlete account so you can follow along.
That's great. Thank you so much. So
You're welcome.
really answers the question. So I am very excited to hand over to Tiago now to tell us a little bit more about the pilot we had for the past few months with the national team. So Tiago, it's all
Great.
Thanks, Pavel, and thanks, Pat. I personally would prefer to listen to Pat for another 2 hours. I've been using TrainingPeaks for 5 months with the South African national team, and I've learned so much from what Pat just illustrated in a couple of minutes that we got to listen. So I'm continuously evolving within TrainingPeaks, so I'm not going to pretend to be an expert of any sort, but what I am prepared to do with TrainingPeaks is to explore, to learn, and to play a little bit more. I play daily on TrainingPeaks, and every day I'm just learning more and more and more and more. And it's becoming more of a tool for rowing South Africa because we are limited within resources. And when it comes to resources being limited, I find there's a massive gap in the market for a physiologist, and we don't have the money to be able to pay a full-time physiologist. So TrainingPeak is kind of just keeping me honest as a national coach, to not overextend the athletes, but also keep a very tight balance between those three important scores between form, fitness, and fatigue. And if that even freaks you out, just what I'm talking about there, the more you become accustomed to TrainingPeaks, the more those terms, all those terminologies become a little bit more familiar. So the purpose of my segment is just to give you my take on what I've learned, or how training has affected us in the last 5 months. So, but what I want to start by saying is the more you explore the app, the more you explore this tool, the better that you'll become to it. So I'm sure that to some South African rowing coaches, and I'm pretty sure coaches that are on this call, is some of the terminology would freak you out slightly. But the more you become accustomed to TrainingPeaks, the more familiar that will become. So that's my first bit of advice, or my first bit of wisdom for my segment. What I have found probably being the best thing when it comes to TrainingPeaks is the 5-year data. That's what you can do. The first thing you need to do is ensure that all athletes sync their 5 years data, because retrospective data has been a game changer in my program development. And I'm going to share sort of 2 cases or 2 stories, as you will, throughout my segment, which I'll circle back to why I believe the retrospective data, or syncing those 5-year plan or 5-year data, is super important. So I've already mentioned that what I have enjoyed the most about TrainingPeaks is how it keeps me honest. So what happened was, we've been using TrainingPeaks for the last 5 months, and my athletes have obviously synced their 5-year data, or probably some less, some more. So I can actually go back and see their data from as early or as early as the Olympic Games in Paris last year. And basically what happened, and this is probably a bit of a touchy subject, is to say that we actually overcooked the Olympic Games. 6 weeks prior to that, we had a boat class within our national training team that was 2.2 seconds off gold, but they just missed out on the medals. They were in 4th place, and they landed up 9th at the Olympic Games. And that 6-week block, we sort of repeated the training program. We knew we were onto something, but they were doing those same sessions at a high intensity that they were into perhaps the World Cup regatta, which was the one prior to. So going back to my PMC chart, or the performance management chart, I can see, that the same session done into a World Cup regatta was a lot more intensive going into perhaps an Olympic Games regatta. And if I had this data, I would have seen it. I suppose if I had a physiologist, I would have also seen it or would have known it, but I wasn't able to see those things. So the same session required more recovery, but I didn't have those metrics. I thought I knew, but it becomes a little bit subjective, and the coach becomes under pressure, as well as anything else going into Olympic Games. So that's sort of the first thing that I want to say. That's my first case study that I've enjoyed, is going back now to see, where we were and what we did in order to get there. And then the second really relevant case currently that we have is we have an under 23 female athlete that we are taking to under 23s in 6 weeks' time. This same athlete was a silver medalist at a junior world championship last year. All right. And subsequent to that, she's training in the UK, and now she's going to come back to South Africa, and then we're going to do final preparations. I think we only have about 3 or 4 weeks with her to do the under 23s. This athlete has obviously come onto TrainingPeaks for the last 5 months with us, but her retrospective data has created insight for us to see how we can best tailor a program for her going into under 23s based on our limited time we have with her. So we have the data of her going into, perhaps maybe even we have data for her for the last 2 or 3 years, but we also have data of how she went in to win the silver medal at a junior world championship. And then we also have all her training that she's been doing in the UK since she's left the country. So when she comes back, it's going to be quite seamless to be able to design programs for that. And that's thanks to TrainingPeaks. So these are the little nuances that TrainingPeaks have sort of helped us. And I suppose within rowing and rowing in South Africa, or rowing in general, we have some work to do, or TrainingPeaks has some work to do to make rowing a little bit more customized. But the more involved we get within, I think it will become even more seamless. The next thing I wanted to discuss is to say that there are a couple of things that I have stumbled across. So I'm so used to now, and I think a lot of rowing coaches, or maybe even other coaches, other sporting coaches will find, is that we do love our own spreadsheets. All right. So one of my challenges that I'm facing is that I designed my training program on a very simple Excel spreadsheet, and I've done it for probably close to over a decade right now. And as well as I also have a spreadsheet that has that I record all the data from perhaps ergos or water sessions, their runs, their cycles, and even in the gym or ergo tests. But now with TrainingPeaks, everything is in one place. So now what you do is you have to be able to work on your spreadsheet and then obviously copy it onto to TrainingPeaks. So that's one of my challenges that I'm still working with. I still love my spreadsheet, and every day I work with TrainingPeaks, I'm becoming a little bit more familiar with it. Where I'm going to be in a year's time, I don't know. Will I fully integrate into TrainingPeaks and do all my training plans on it, or will I still be working on my Excel spreadsheet and manually bringing it across as I go? So that's something for us to maybe discuss, or maybe even just think about. That's what I'm currently going through. I don't have an answer for it yet, and I don't know where I'm going to be landing up from a year. But one of my athletes actually said it this morning in their session, was they enjoying the training plan within TrainingPeaks. It seems a little bit more personal and a little bit more interactive, based on, I used to just literally print out a PDF, slam it onto a WhatsApp group, and that was your training session for a week. Where TrainingPeaks has now made it a little bit more customized. It makes it a little bit more personal to the athletes. I can go in and say, Johnny, you're not going to be doing 4 500s, you're going to be doing 3, and change it. Where on a PDF, I wouldn't be printing out a new PDF with a new one just for Johnny to do his 3 500s. I'll probably just tell him on the day. Where now on my way to the dam or on my way to a water session, I can say, right, okay, cool. Johnny, you're only going to do 3 500s, and then maybe have a conversation with the athlete. So again, just a little nuance that I'm sort of learning as we go. One thing that I would advise against, and maybe Pat, you have a little bit more experience, and other coaches, probably have much more experience than I do when it comes to this, is stay away from Google, all right? In terms of just trying to establish what a good fitness score would be. Keep it in context. All right. So it's very interesting. I coach Olympic athletes. I would assume that their fitness scores are quite high. They train quite hard. But when you Google what is a good fitness score, some of the scores or some of the values or metrics that come out are quite scary, you know. So what would I do? You know, do I just overtrain the athletes to try and get their fitness scores up to, perhaps I've heard some pro cyclists can get up to about 170 CTL or fitness. We're currently, my fitness scores are perhaps around about 123, which is pretty average and pretty normal for a professional athlete. And I'm going, okay, I need to be the best. So what do I do? And I think I'm just cautioning you against it, is that training these type of metrics or these type of values are very individual, and that's what I've learned a lot in the last 5 months when it comes to TrainingPeaks. Is it's very individual to the athletes. Just like I heard, I was even watching a podcast or a YouTube video today about a cyclist talk about his fatigue value, that he's gone up to about 200, and he's had some of his best weeks. So again, all right, I couldn't imagine a rower getting her or his fatigue values to that amount. It's certainly not in the next couple of years. So I just think that's something that you need to be careful with. Make sure you have a lot of context to react to those sort of things. And again, like I said, is keep it individual. And you know, those are pretty much things that I am learning along the way. I mean, I don't know if Pavel, if there are questions. I haven't seen if there are questions coming in yet, but or maybe you have things that you want to add to you know, South African rowing and the TrainingPeaks integration.
Great. I think, you know, talking about the fitness and chronic training load and fatigue, it's kind of looking in the mirror, which mirror you look at. Because if you stare at the same mirror for too long, um, and each metric can be gamed, right? So if you get an athlete to there is a question for you, and I think it's more appropriate for you to answer as a rowing coach, because it's rowing specific, right? So Manuela in the chat is asking for an athlete who wants to build more stamina, right, more endurance, and wants to work through those heart rate zones. How do they work out the specific heart rate zones, and how do you stay in them? So any comments on that?
I mean, it sounds basic, but I do all my tests within a lab. I do get my athletes tested within a lab. I do get their zones done through lactate, through VO2 testing in a lab, and I find it more accurate that way. So I would say, Manuela, is perhaps get the athletes tested within a lab, and then I learned from Pat is to integrate those values within TrainingPeaks. I'm not sure if it's quite rowing related just yet. I know that doesn't answer your question, but I would do it. I would do it properly. I would do the tests properly, Pavel and Manuela.
So to follow up then, so once you've got the data, right? So, or if you know, some watches and some tools do calculate the zones for you. So which one is it? You know, we saw, I think Patrick showed us up to 8 zones, like 5A, 5B, 5C. So which zone would you recommend for specifically asking for stamina building?
This is a tricky one. So I suppose it's the type of model that you're trying to follow. I mean, if there's a polarized model, you would stay within your zone 1 for long extended periods of time. But there's many studies around, you know, zone 2 doing that, or perhaps maybe even a threshold model where you know, that's how you're going to increase capacity. So I personally am following a very polarized model. We're staying within 65% to 72% of our max heart rates on a daily basis. And if you would like to see, can I share a screen, or Pavel? I can show you.
So what I hear from you while sharing the screen is that you do take a percentage of maximum heart rate, and then you're saying 65 to 75% of max heart rate. That's what you want the athlete to do most of the work.
That's when I'm following a polarized program. Yes, I suppose that's individual to you. But if you want to increase, that sort of base capacity, I would say stay low, do it for a long extended period of time. I'm struggling to share here, but it's
No, no
fine.
worries. I think
Yeah,
I've got
I've got
the we've got the percentage numbers. I think that's what Manuela was looking for. Friends, I think we are at the point where we unfortunately have to say goodbye. And maybe let's finish up with some final next steps. So, Pat, you mentioned there's going to be an email going out after this webinar. Just can you recap quickly before we finish up?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for joining, everyone. As I mentioned, we have coaches who have probably been using TrainingPeaks for a while. For anyone who is interested in using it as a coach, definitely we will be following up with an email to everyone who registered. The webinar recordings can be included in there. But certainly you can reply to that email. That email will go directly to me. And just let me know what your coach account username is. There's going to be in the follow-up email, there's a button to actually start the trial. Let me know what your username is. I'll extend the trial for another 7 days. You'll have the ability to schedule a one-to-one call with me as well. And then from there, we do have a custom code that will, in terms of just like pricing for your coach account, we can talk through that as well. But there's a code that we have that will remove the $99 startup fee, so you can get started for free. And our billing is on the 1st of each month. So even, say today you started paying for a coach account, you purchased it, you wouldn't be charged until July 1st. But keep your eyes out in your inbox. Hopefully not spam. It might go to your spam. That should be going out by sometime this evening or tomorrow morning, or I guess we're spread out throughout the world. So it could be, Friday morning. Just kidding. But you'll see it in there somehow. But if you don't, my email is P as in Patrick, P Walker at trainingpeaks.com. Or you can email coach@trainingpeaks.com, and that will also come to me. Just let them know that you attended the webinar.
Thank you so much. Thank you, friends. It was great. Thank you for your contribution, Patrick and Tiago. I hope you found this webinar valuable and insightful for your own coaching or athletic career. But at this point, it's time for us to say goodbye. Goodbye, everyone.
Okay.
Have a
Thanks,
great day.
everyone.
thank you.
Take care.